If you had to say 2-3 things as a country we just have to focus on to be Viksit Bharat and all, what are those 2-3 things according to you?
Technology advancement is absolutely non-negotiable. You have to have capacity, which India itself has. That's the way the industry has evolved.
How confident are you about India's semiconductor plan?
This is probably the most generous government industrial policy program ever undertaken.
Still, when I meet a lot of people, they still feel we are not as easy as some of the Southeast Asian players for that matter. Do you think that we can do more over there?
As a IAS officer, I say it with all responsibility. This is something which needs to percolate further, even within the bureaucracy. My expectation really is from India's youth. They do this much faster than anybody else. I think in the future, it's their audacity, literally, of dreaming big and thinking beyond what we normally think of.
If I say the word India, what does it mean to you?
Very proud of the fact that I belong here, that this is my place and this is where I'm most comfortable. I may not be happy with everything that happens, but I have the right to express my unhappiness with something or the other, because
So let's start with, how confident are you about India's semiconductor plan, mission, whatever we are doing in the semiconductor space?
I think now I can say that I'm more than 100% confident, for the simple reason that just day before yesterday, you actually had the first pilot plant inaugurated, CG Power's pilot plant, which the minister inaugurated in Sanand in Gujarat. And the massive construction of Micron's first plant is also very, very advanced.
Yeah.
And that will be the real full-scale major facility, which will be commissioned before the end of this calendar year. So now we are almost there. So I think, and the first purely India-made chips have also rolled out. I have visited the pilot facility of both Micron and Tata Electronics. So we are there in terms of the primary goals of the semiconductor mission having been achieved. We've already approved 10 specific projects. These 3 or 4 projects I mentioned, the Tata projects and Micron's and CG Power's project, are those projects which were in the first lot of projects to be approved. That was less than about 2 years ago, or about 2 years ago. And we are now close to...
Yeah. No, and congratulations, because to me, this is also all said and done. Of course, we have to congratulate a lot of people, but it also shows that, the bureaucracy, Indian bureaucracy, moves fast, and your department in this has moved fast. Having said that, sir, I also want to understand, I was just researching, and there was this thing that where is India when it comes to its semiconductor? They said we are like the SUVs where the world is in the Formula One, like be it Taiwan, Korea and US.
See, I think we need to be realistic. And the important thing is that semiconductors are about 6 decades in the making. I mean, sometime in the post-World War II is when the initial thought of having this kind of circuits, electronic circuits being built came up as an idea. And then in the 60s, it started getting developed and it grew rapidly, the so-called famous Moore's Law, and, they kept shrinking and so on. India started at about the same time with the establishment of the Semiconductor Lab, Mohali. But somehow it didn't go much further forward. I think, you can't say we've had other programs which went ahead, and including the space program, and to some extent the space program was also supported by SCL. So many of the chips which even now fly on many of our rockets and other space vehicles have chips from SCL even today. And for a while SCL was actually under ISRO. So that is how the strategic objectives were linked. But at a commercial level, it did not really take off. A number of reasons for that. many people felt that that level of advanced manufacturing could not be done in India. Second thing is that industry of that nature requires fairly high subsidies, and as a developing nation at that point in time, providing those subsidies was not easy. So you could only pick one or two major bets, and those subsidies were not provided. I think now finally we are in a position to provide the kind of subsidies that are needed to help an industry of this nature thrive. And I think that has been the significant development that you now see in the semiconductor space. But in a sense, we have to understand, relative to India's scale, this is probably the most generous government industrial policy program ever undertaken. The government of India provides a 50% subsidy for the build out of a semiconductor plant. On top of that, state governments give about half of that. So almost 75% of the cost is met in this manner. And more than anything else, usually when these subsidies are paid out, they pay out only after you've completed the project. In this case, we pay out those subsidies simultaneously.
Yeah, and it's a huge number.
So basis, and the subsidy is huge. Which brings me to the next point. So which means from India's own standpoint, the fact that we have put out about 76,000 crores for this project, and we have committed almost the entire amount, is, I think, a very, very significant measure. At the point when it was initiated, it was about $10 billion. But then you look at it relatively, you find that with this kind of money, which is difficult to afford in India's context even today, what is the technology that you can actually look at? For a number of reasons, we chose to go with mature nodes, right? Between 28 nanometers and about 110 nanometers. The reason for that is quite simple, that these are nodes where the technology is reasonably well established. And for a country which is just beginning in this area, it is better to go with well-established technology and succeed at it than take a very risky bet at a very high-end technology, which is also much more expensive. If you look at it, we are putting down $10 billion. Country like Japan is putting down $38 billion just to do two fabs, which are 12 nanometers and 2 nanometers, right? And the US is putting out something like $58 billion in subsidies. Now, given the size of their economies, given the level of their income, it's possible for them to put out subsidies of that order. India's case is a little different. So we have to, I think we have taken a wise bet in, we have to be in the semiconductor space. There is no question of not being there. It is a foundational industry. It's very fundamental to the way the entire electronics ecosystem works. And now electronics are embedded in practically everything you use. So which means that you have to be there. But having said that, you also have to be there in those spaces where it is most used. And the mature nodes is a very big market in itself. We have to understand, although the cutting edge has gone further, the use of mature node semiconductors is quite extensive in almost all the domestic electrical appliances you use, in all the auto electronics and what you use in cars. Most of those are in the mature nodes. Those are all chips which can actually get made in India and used fairly extensively. So I think we've chosen as a deliberate matter of policy to pick those segments where we have the best chance of success, which are where we can invest based on how big our purse is and what we can afford, and also which will have widespread use and the market is stable. So I think this is the basis on which these have been chosen. It doesn't mean that we can't develop beyond this. So we have to establish a solid base and then grow on top of that. So companies which actually establish these facilities at this level can then grow beyond that and do what needs to be done.
So while you were answering, I was just thinking that it is India's Lagan moment when it comes to semiconductor, because when we criticize that, oh, not much is happening and we are so behind in this space, what we forget is that our journey is so young here. With bureaucrat and leaders like you, from announcement to implementation is happening, and we've entered the playground now. And yahan se fir aage badhenge.
I think, I'm fairly clear that, civil servants only do so much. I think, and this I don't mean in any other sense, but everywhere across. I've worked in the state of Tamil Nadu. I've worked in the government of India at different points in time. I think the political leadership to back all this is extremely important. Very often it is said about Tamil Nadu saying that, oh, it's, regardless of which government there is, the bureaucrats get things done. I think we are afforded the space to get it done, especially in terms of industrial policy and things. The politics of the state has recognized that this is something which is in public interest, and this is something that they are prepared to support, regardless of which government is in power. So there is a consensus, there's a political consensus at that level. So we are given that space to operate and work, and that's what is needed. And I would say that in the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, we've been given that space and we've been given the leadership to enable that to happen. So I think it would be, I mean, having spent 36 years in the civil service, I don't think it would be right for me to say that, civil servants make it.
I told you I was researching, and when we look at anything that doesn't work, it's like the bureaucracy. There's still so much of unease of doing business and bureaucracy. Bureaucrats don't move things. So I can, as a outsider, say that what is worth appreciating, and in this, in your department, in this ministry, from an announcement to making something like this, we have to call out that it has happened, or we semicon hone wala hai. So my other question to you, I was studying about the Shinju in Taiwan. They have created a whole ecosystem, right? From right now we have, and then why I'm asking about this, they have a research, they have a university, they have a fab factory, they have, they have everything. So do you think we will be able to create something like that?
I think part of our goal, I've been to Shinju.
Oh, you have?
I know how that ecosystem works, and it has taken almost about 60 odd years for that to develop. It's not overnight.
They started in 60s.
Yeah, in the mid 60s or early 60s is when they started. With IIT is their research institution which is based there. Then of course there's a Shinju University. There are one or two other universities which have come up there, and then the entire ecosystem was built around that. It's a whole city built around semiconductors and fabs, and it's quite amazing to actually go and see it. And when they walk you through how it has been done, it's truly amazing. And the one thing when you realize about, when you look at Taiwan and you realize that given their history and given how it has come about, and given what you still see side by side with all these modern developments, many of the older buildings look like any building in India, right? I mean, so what they've done is they've preserved the older stuff. It's not as if they've demolished all of that and built just these modern structures. So less than half a kilometer from Taipei 101, which is that the highest, tallest building in Japan, in Taiwan, you have buildings which look like out of any street in any city in India, and which are maintained more neatly and clean. But then what it gives you is a clear understanding of this is a country which maybe 30, 40 years ago was at this level, and look where they've gone now. And clearly then it gives you hope, and it gives you a sense of what the possibilities are for how far India can go. So I think Shinju, you have to really look at from that perspective, saying that this is something which they've managed over the last 4 to 5 decades. And clearly it is something in India's case we can again replicate, and probably since we have a model to follow, we could actually do it even faster. And clearly, there's the other thing which gets established by that is that at least an industry like semiconductors, you need clusters. That is when you really develop, which is what we are trying to do around the initial 1 or 2 clusters where these units are coming up, the big ones. And the goal is to actually build a cluster of that nature, bring research into that place, bring other social infrastructure into that place, and that is the direction in which we are heading.
Yeah, because there is no denying to the fact that the world, be the geopolitics to anything, will be hinging on this ecosystem.
Absolutely.
So, okay, one question. There's a lot happening in Gujarat, and I'm from Bihar. There are so many parts of India. Do you see that the investments and growths will be more diversified in the times to come?
You see, I think you have to look at different segments of industry. I think you should not look at only saying that, as I said now, it's important. The lesson we draw is that clustering in one or two locations initially is very important before other clusters develop. If you look at the semiconductor industry anywhere in the world, right? I mean, in South Korea, it's centered around Incheon, where the airport is between Incheon and Seoul. So that is the locus. In Japan also, there are 2 or 3 locations where it is centered. In the US, again, it is centered. I mean, it's called the Silicon Valley, the entire design industry. So there are cluster benefits. And clearly, we have cluster benefits which derive from this. And this is an ecosystem where now there are 2 parts to this. One part is the actual manufacturing of semiconductors. Now, let's be clear that these are highly automated factories. It's not as if they're going to create, lakhs of jobs. They're going to create a modest number of jobs. There is going to be an ecosystem around it which will create a few more jobs. But we are not getting into this sector because it gives us huge employment potential. The employment potential, on the other hand, really lies, and especially high-end employment potential, really lies in the semiconductor design space. And today, the semiconductor design space, there are companies which are in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in Pune, in Chennai, in Gurgaon, in Noida. So all these are important locations where semiconductor design is coming up. And we have about 20% of the total human resources, semiconductor human resources, design human resources in the world are based out of India. So in that sense, there are other elements of this industry which can be spread out even now, which are already spread out and can continue to stay spread out and generate more jobs in other parts of the country. These projects need to be concentrated, at least in a few clusters, for the reason that there are many economies which result from that, many other attendant facilities which have to be created, where it would be a waste of resources to try and do it at multiple locations.
Yes. So it's very important in this space for the government to back the innovation and early stage innovation. Tell us what you're doing, what MeitY is doing when it comes to startups and supporting early innovators.
I think there are 2 or 3 things that MeitY is doing. Since we are talking about semiconductors, we have the design-linked incentive scheme, and we have something called the Chips to Startup program. So that part of it is being supported fairly extensively. What we give students in colleges and what we give young entrepreneurs and so on is access to what are called EDA tools. They are the software tools by which semiconductors themselves are designed, and they are very expensive to buy. We've either bought or entered into agreements with some of the publishers of these tools or some of the companies which make these tools, companies like Cadence, Synopsys, and so on. And those are something which we centrally procure and hold and make it available. So almost about 270 odd institutions across the country have had access to these tools, and they can use this to design. That is one part of what we do. The second part is then we support them, and especially since you mentioned Kerala, the IIT Madras and our CDAC center in Trivandrum, both of them support chip design on what is called the RISC-V model. RISC-V, RISC, R-I-S-C, the Roman V, 5. So that is a particular kind of open source way of building chips. And the company that you alluded to, startup company, is building on that platform.
Interesting, yeah.
So that is something which then becomes India's own intellectual property and India's own sort of development in that space. So that is one set of chip building that we are supporting. And they are given further grants under the design-linked incentive scheme, which is part of the India Semiconductor Mission. And the grants can go up to a total of about 50 crore, including various kinds of initial grants and then support for the marketing and so on. And that is the basis on which some of these companies have started up and they're working. We have assisted so far about 23 companies in that space, and more are coming up. But now we discover that there are a few issues with the way that the first phase of the design-linked incentive scheme was run, which sort of inhibited more people from applying and also is not adequate to support a further scale-up.
Yeah.
What they're looking for is more risk capital and so on. So we are reworking the design of the design-linked incentive scheme, and hopefully we will be launching it shortly, as and when the next phase of the India Semiconductor mission is launched, or even before that. Fundamentally with the view of further accelerating the development of companies, startups, and not just startups, but domestic design. Because as I told you, 20% of the overall design human resources globally are in India, but most of them work for international companies, multinational companies, and their IP that they create, the intellectual property which is created by all of them working at various locations in India, is ultimately held somewhere else in the world. So our goal ultimately is to make sure that more of that intellectual property is held in India.
It's a very important point. IP. Right now, as in we are partnering, we are working, we are collaborating, we are giving subsidies, and actually these large companies are coming, setting up. But at the end of the day, it has to be our knowledge capital and our IP. And you were saying that we are in our own way focusing. I didn't know about this CDAC and IIT Madras collaborating to create this domestic. How big is the focus?
I think it is big, but not big enough. It has to grow further. And there's a lot of realization around this. A lot of people are wanting to support this. And there's, interestingly enough, many people who are of Indian origin but elsewhere in the world who increasingly want to support it. So we are trying to work around that. And you might find some interesting announcements regarding that in the upcoming Semicon.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. So now I have to ask you, being part of India and looking at the world, be it the tariff debate that is having, discussions that are happening, if you had to say 2-3 things as a country we just have to focus on and go all out to be all those Viksit Bharat and all those things that we talk about, to realize that on ground, what are those 2-3 things according to you?
I think the first, technology advancement is absolutely non-negotiable.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to sort of move forward on technology. And today, whether it is artificial intelligence or any of this, we have to have autonomous capacity. We have to have capacity which India itself has. The second part of it is that, these are global value chains. You're not going to control in technology space, particularly in electronics. That's the way the industry has evolved. There is some amount of specialization, and the way that particular companies or particular geographies have developed, like we were talking about Taiwan and semiconductors. But now there's an increasing realization that there are too many risks globally also, geopolitically, if it's only at a single location.
Yeah.
So I think it's in the overall interest of the world and in India's own interest that the diversification of the supply chain happens, and you can actually acquire technology, acquire the means of doing it from multiple locations. Well, at least 2 or 3. You need to have alternatives. And I think in that context, India becoming a key element of this supply chain is very important. At some level of the supply chain, we need to be a key player. And that becomes critical. And we also should be in such a position that we just don't depend on one country alone or one place alone for our own supplies. Because again, so it's like give and take. So we need to have more than one alternative from whom we can buy, and we need to have more than one alternative to whom we can sell. And I think that's how we need to make sure that we become part of a global supply chain, and a significant enough part so that we are never ignored.
Yeah.
So I think that is one thing which is extremely important.
That is one thing that
I think is absolutely important. The second thing that we have to stay focused on is that unless you grow economically, and unless we grow significantly economically, you're never going to be taken adequately seriously across the globe.
Yes.
So that is something which we have to continue to keep a relentless focus on, that economic growth in the last few years, we've been the fastest growing economy amongst the major economies in the world, in the G20 and so on. That momentum is something that we will have to keep up, and that momentum has to be kept up even in the face of adverse global situations. I mean, those are things that you cannot help. I mean, whether it is a global financial crisis or COVID or whatever is the Ukraine war or whatever are the latest set of issues that are going on right now. You have to adapt to those situations. You have to mitigate those situations. You cannot control all of them. But so we have to be adept at adapting to those situations and making sure that we make the best of where we are, and keeping this relentless focus on growth, because what growth does is, as it's often said, a rising tide lifts all boats. So it is something which will work for everybody in the long run, and that's something which we have to really stay focused on. We have to do all that it takes, whether it is in the nature of other reforms, other elements of how we can make ease of doing business significantly better in India. And all of that we need to work on to make sure that we capitalize on it.
So there I want to ask, ease of doing business is still, when I meet a lot of people, they still feel we are not as easy as some of the Southeast Asian players for that matter. Do you think that we can do more over there?
I think there is more which needs to be done. I think, as a IAS officer, I say it with all responsibility. This is something which needs to percolate further, even within the bureaucracy. That we have to understand that there are situations where we have to take decisions which would help industry to do well, and we have to make sure that we are able to address the kind of issues they have, legitimate issues, and see that we are able to support their growth. I mean, it needs to be a policy framework, and it needs to be a way in which policy is implemented, which actually is pro-markets and pro-everybody who's a participant, rather than even oriented towards one or two. It has to ensure that everybody benefits and moves up.
Sir, there in economy, one thing, and Prime Minister talked about it in his Independence Day address, is energy. Energy is extremely important.
Energy is absolutely vital, and I think clearly, this day and age when the emphasis is on green energy and ways in which we are able to make sure that the climate change crisis is also abated is important, and we have to contain emissions. All of those are concerns. So clearly we have an advantage in things like solar, given our location, wind in certain parts of the country, and offshore wind in certain other parts of the country. So all these are important sources of energy.
No, sir.
Absolutely crucial. But we also need to understand that with new and renewable sources of energy, they're not firm power, in the sense that nighttime solar may not be available, off-season wind may not be available. So energy storage becomes the next key element that we need to look at. There are interesting experiments there. There's pumped storage, there is battery storage of various kinds. So all of these are areas that we need to work towards, and there's a lot more which needs to go on. There has been some promise with hydrogen, for instance, green hydrogen. So we'll have to see how each of these mechanisms of actually storing energy is also promoted. And then clearly, nuclear power, if you're able to mitigate all the risks and the fears that people have, is again a very important and valuable source of power, because it's very stable and it is green, whichever way it is. There are no emissions.
How confident are you about India's AI mission?
Very. I think India's AI mission is actually doing well. It's many international experts have called it a unique experiment. I mean, World Bank, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all of them have really seen this as a model which is different.
Is it uniquely Indian model?
It is, I think, entirely uniquely Indian, in the sense of the way we have addressed each of the issues, in the sense that we have recognized that this is a sector where most of the actual provisioning will be done by the private sector, but the government can play a key catalytic role and ensure that it happens. So I think that way it's a unique model. We are establishing the compute capacity, for instance. Initially, our thought was that we will do a VGF and give up to maybe even 50% of the cost of establishing it as something which, as a viability gap funding. Then we realized that that may not be a model that works, because many people, many companies had already started the process of establishing the facilities. And it would be unfair to those who had already done that.
Yeah.
And second, that the money available will not go very far in establishing that facility, and it might actually create a problem for others who want to establish a similar facility, because there'll be one which is subsidized and another which is not. So it was more important to create a level playing field.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do instead was some kind of a voucher-based system, an assured price that a company would get for the service that it supplied, the AI service that it supplied. And I think that's been a very interesting model. Initially, when the AI mission was set up, what we had promised was that 10,000 GPU worth capacity would be set up. Now we've already contracted 38,000 GPU, and more can be actually done. And it will also run for a longer period of time, in the sense for 4 or 5 years we can continue to provide this capacity for use by Indian entrepreneurs, innovators, researchers, students, and so on.
So it is there now? It is available?
It is established in the country, or in the process of being established. So in the next 3 to 4 months, all of it would be fully established, and we keep contracting more. The thing is, we can keep adding.
So it's not just a one-time
It's dynamic. It's
thing.
dynamic.
Yeah.
So that is as far as the compute is concerned, because that is one basic requirement. The second basic requirement is a model. And initially there were some thoughts, and people thought that we should not look to establish a model of our own. We should use one of the existing models, because it's very expensive again to develop a new model. But there was also another thought, and there was considerable discussion around it, that it's important that we establish a model of our own, because it needs to represent a mechanism of, how do I put it? It needs to represent India's cultural and linguistic diversity.
Yes.
And all of which may not get captured in a Western model or a model from any other part of the world. So which is why I think that effort is also being given greater emphasis and is being supported. We have already supported 4 models, Sarvam, Gyani, GAN, and Socket in the first round. More are in the way of being approved. So we should be moving forward.
But so these will require continuous capital, no? Investment.
No, we are supporting it with initial investment, and subsequently we will have to find mechanisms by which they develop a revenue model. And some of these models are being developed jointly with the private sector. It's not as if we are the only funders. There are VC companies and others who are coming in there. So it's not as if we are the only players in town. It's not as if the government is the only support. And all of our academic institutions and others are also fully involved in this. So they are also aware as to how they can go forward and get it done. So it's a mix. It's again, the way that we work with the private sector also, in the way that we push this forward. So it's literally in some ways all hands on board. There are academia representatives, there's private sector, there's government. So everyone comes together to make this happen. And the third big element in AI is data and data sets. So the Datasets platform, AI Kosh, is now ready. And we've hosted more than 1,000 datasets on that platform. And more are getting added all the time, because that's something which is important, because people need to access that on an ongoing basis. So, and we've welcomed there again. We've supported the private sector folks, and we've also supported Um, we've also supported various government ministries and departments to share their data sets in a machine readable format there.
So your department is today looking at such critical things, and I would say the future of our country, the future of everyone, but mostly young Indians who will be coming, because technology, be it AI, be it semiconductor, these are the oils. And this is not just a jargon or analogy one is using, hai ye oil, ye hai fundamental. I want to ask you, yahan pe you have to make quick decisions also, ensure that these policies are implemented. Actually, you get a factory or a fab which starts in Gujarat, or at the same time invest capital in long terms, be it the LLM building. So there's a short term and there's a long term. Tell me, how do you make all that happen? What is your thinking? What is your decision making process? How do you work in this department? Because yes, things are happening, but short term bhi hai, long term bhi hai.
I think it's important that we have to sort of. I have a wonderful team. I mean, I think that's important, and we have leadership which gives us a free hand at the ministerial level. Our instructions are go forward, get things done, and see how you can take all these initiatives forward. So there's clear direction there. My team is dynamic, and I like to believe, but that you should ask them, that I give them enough space to do what they need to do, and I'm there to resolve issues for them, deal with the external environment, sort out issues, bang heads together when that is needed, take up issues with state governments or anybody else. So I think we have a culture which is quite interesting. If they have issues, they come up to me. If they feel that they can handle something, they feel confident enough to take their decisions themselves. They don't have to necessarily come to me for a clearance on every small thing. I trust them to do the right thing, and they invariably do. So which is one way, because if you do not delegate and if you do not empower people to do their jobs.
And clearly, in the last couple of years, one can see, in the last 2 years for sure, I can see that things are moving and actions are being taken. So, but how do you channelize yourself that you're also thinking long term while making things happen? Because in our country, one thing, of course, for all the love and passion and whatever, like everything that we have for the country, we've also been very short term thinkers.
I think there are two things here. I mean, one thing is that in the long term what is a direction you need to head in, and what are the things that you need to get done. What are the big priorities? Once you have the big priorities, you have to convert them into, I mean, there's no point in going on talking about we need this in the country. I mean, then when you have the opportunity, you have to actually convert them into something meaningful. Then you have to put together these programs and schemes which will enable that, which is how, whether it is the semiconductor mission or the India AI mission that is put together. Then there are some, implementation responsibilities on that. And as you're implementing, course correction, what can you do better, some monitoring to see that, work goes on. So you have to kind of keep doing that, some coordination, ensuring that everything comes together. So you have to do both. I mean, that is in the manner of speaking, what people in higher management have to necessarily do at any point in time. And we can't then say, oh, I lost sight of where the future was because I was very focused on doing nitty-gritty on a daily basis. And you have to keep your eyes and ears open. You have to sort of read. You have to listen to what people are telling you.
Do you think overall the fraternity is listening to people on ground?
I don't know about the fraternity, but I think the one thing, one value which was instilled in me early on was that you should be available to meet people whenever they want to meet
Which you do.
And that I think is very important. And I'm very happy to note that the Cabinet Secretary recently reiterated that in a letter which was also reported in the media. I think it's very important because that's when you get a feel for what is happening.
Yeah.
People have an opportunity to come and tell you what is happening because, we can't sort of assume that we know everything. You get a variety of insights. You understand whether you are implementing something in a particular way, what is actually happening. People can give you feedback of that nature. So I think making enough time for those kind of interactions is important.
Yeah.
Just meeting with curated audiences and meeting with people who want to sort of organize an event and come and tell you a few things is fine. I mean, it has its relevance, it has its importance. But I think it's also important to listen to genuine voices and voices who have, issues, problems. You have to be prepared to listen to them, because that's how you then can figure out what are the correctives you need to apply and how you can do things better.
Yeah.
And I mean, through my career, I mean, from day one, I think if there's one thing that that has really served me well, it is having my ears open and eyes open.
Yeah.
Listen to people.
Yeah, and that's why, sir, I have to tell you this, and I'm speaking, I have messaged you this, but I'm speaking on record here, is that a lot of people, I think many people who worked with you in Tamil Nadu, and many people who know you from there, and this, again, diverse set of people, and here in Delhi, and sometimes when I was waiting outside, so many people, they all have very high regard for you. And that also, I think, somewhere comes from conducting oneself. It's not, I don't think so, genuine regard behind your back comes just like that. It comes from conducting yourself in a certain way every time. And
well, you're making a statement, so I have to thank you for it.
Just accept it, because the middle classes don't accept all the good things, but this is a fact. And that brings me to the question that, from being such a successful bureaucrat and handling finance in Tamil Nadu to technology, MeitY, how do you navigate and do it?
I mean, I can honestly tell you that I was very surprised when I was posted here. Also a little apprehensive, because I'm not a technologist by training, and I've never actually worked in the technology space. I'm fundamentally a civil servant. I try to look at what is on my table, what do I need to do, what are the broader goals, and it's the same set of things. But I think it's been a very, very interesting learning curve. It's been also a steep learning curve. There's this saying about IAS officers that you learn on the job at the cost of the job sometimes. So, but
no, but the cost. This is good. This is good, because this is the most important.
It's important that and I've been pleasantly surprised by how interesting I've found the job, and how interesting it has been for me personally to learn about so many things which I might not have learnt about otherwise. And I think that's been a big plus. And in that sense, I've really enjoyed myself. I think more than anything else, it's been learning. It's been challenging. It's sort of out of my comfort zone, but
globally, because you are in a space which is constantly evolving.
It's
right?
constantly changing.
Yeah.
So, but maybe that itself gives you some comfort, because it changes so fast that nobody can really claim to know everything about it. So, to that extent, I think it kind of works. But clearly, I've relished this challenge. I've enjoyed it so far. It's been almost 2 years, and
I think there's a learning for all young people, for everyone, that constantly be a learner, have that mindset. You can't, because you're like a secretary, you're top of your ladder, and it's not that, hey, I know it all. Like what I learned from you, what I'm learning is that having that curiosity, that openness.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And, that's you keep learning and you keep adapting, and it's oftentimes everything. I mean, right from the way that, and it's interesting how a civil servant's training structure is built. You spend 2 weeks. I mean, your early training is how to be, or what does a village officer do. You spend 2 weeks sort of studying what he does, and then you spend another 2 weeks doing what he does, and then you move your way up that way. So, and then in a year you're back, and you're telling all these about 400 village officers who work with you, saying, this is not the way to do things, and this is the way to do. So, I've spent all my career actually learning from people, and then giving them some direction.
Yeah. So last, I will go. So rapid fire, I will do with you. You have to answer it in a word or a sentence. One policy you think hasn't got enough attention but will be a game changer?
Now, if I look at what is happening in the ministry itself, I think one area which we need to really look at is our overall, the cyber security aspect. We need to bring it all together in a way that it can make a significant difference. I think not enough attention has been paid. We are trying now very hard. I can tell you that we've just got a nod to recruit more people for cybersecurity related work after a struggle for almost 4 or 5 years, and all of that is changing a bit now. But and I know that the government gives it very high priority, but I think there's a lot more work which has to actually get done to make it happen.
What's your biggest worry when it comes to India's digital future, and what gives you the most hope?
My biggest worry is that I think in every dimension, we continue to sort of be in a leadership position, or we are right now not, but we need to aspire there, we need to get there, so that we don't become just takers of technology, but we also are creators of technology.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have that balance. I mean, it's not as if you're going to create everything, but at least you need to create enough for you to have that balance and know where you stand. So I think that is something which really needs to happen in the days to come. And my expectation really is from India's youth. I think they do this much faster than anybody else. They adapt to this much faster, and they've shown that over the past many years. And I think in the future, it's their audacity, literally, of dreaming big and thinking beyond what we normally think of, and actually working to get there. That's what will take us where we want to.
Which country's digital transformation journey do you study or admire, and why?
Interesting question. I think if you look at it, I mean, some of the countries in Eastern Europe, places like Estonia and things, are very interesting examples. They're small, but they sort of have an interesting way in which they've approached the entire question. And you have a situation in Estonia today where you can run the country without actually being there, because everything is twinned and everything is simultaneously done from elsewhere. So that in one aspect is an interesting example. Taiwan, which I spoke about, is another interesting example. Israel is a third example. So a number of these countries have interesting journeys. And even within India, I mean, it's interesting when you look at states. Some of them have advanced quite remarkably. Sometimes when you look at kind of work which is done in a state like Madhya Pradesh in this space is very interesting. So it gives you an opportunity to actually leapfrog and adapt technology to do interesting things. So,
if India were to become the Silicon Valley of public digital infrastructure, what's the one missing piece we must urgently solve?
I think there is one aspect where India has had a lot of most of India's connectivity is based on mobile broadband, and it's good. I think it's sort of been a quick way of getting there. But if we have to really, upgrade capacity and make sure that linkage is there, then fixed line broadband, which actually carries the internet into places, really needs to expand much more. And that is, when you look at it, India, 90% of the people access internet through the mobile broadband, whereas in most other countries it's the other way. 90% go through the fixed line broadband. I think eventually it may crimp how much we can expand the digital footprint across the country, and therefore it's important that alongside the mobile broadband, the fixed line broadband also grows throughout the country. It's sometimes ignored, but I think
very important. Very important. And when you say all this, I just think energy also. So much of energy consumption. One piece of advice you give to young IS officers or your MeitY team members about thinking in decades, not quarters.
I think fundamentally we need to set goals for ourselves, but break it down. I mean, I think it's not enough to say, I aspire to be at one point at this point in time. You have a clear long-term goal, but then you have to really break it down into shorter periods. You have to first break it down into 5-year periods. You have to break it down into, an annual thing, and even into quarters, so that you know where you're getting. Last time I looked at it, this is where we were. How much further have I got? Has enough work happened on it? Have we moved forward? These things are important. So you can never lose sight of that. There's a discipline that you need to maintain in terms of having the long-term goal and being willing to actually put up with the drudgery of continuing to pursue it. Because I think that's one thing we need to recognize.
Very well
this kind
said.
of work is a lot of drudgery too.
And a lot is behind the scene also, right? There's no reward or anything, attention for it. If I say the word India, what does it mean for you?
To me, India, I think, is a very, very important concept. I mean, I have always been not just proud of my heritage, but I've always felt very proud of the fact that I belong here, that this is my place and this is where I'm most comfortable. I may not be happy with everything that happens, but I have the right to express my unhappiness with something or the other, because that is when it is your own, you can legitimately do it, and you can say that this is not okay and that is not okay, and ultimately it is something, it's part of you and you're part of it. And so that sense of identity, if there is one sense of identity which is the biggest sense of identity for an individual, at least for me personally, I think being an Indian is an extremely important part of that. And I'm very happy that that I have been able to at least inculcate that in people who are close to me, that we've traveled the world, we've been in different places, but we've always wanted to come back and call this our own.
Yeah, home is India. Okay. And my last question, if you look back at your journey so far, what has been the most fulfilling aspect of this journey?
See, I think to me, one of the most important things in joining the civil service, I've never been much motivated by, I think whatever money is there, whatever comforts are there are more than adequate. I'm very happy with that. But the one thing that was always important to me was this opportunity to meet the highest in the land and the most common person in India. And I think that is something which has always happened. When we were trainees, we met the President of India, the then President, the then Prime Minister, the highest dignitaries, and then immediately after that we went on district training and we went on other forms of training. You meet tribal villages, really backward villages. I've stayed in villages, I've met the most common people, we've worked with the most deprived people, and that's an opportunity which no other career could have given. And I think that's probably been the most rewarding aspect of my career. I mean, I've been to the White House, I've been to 10 Downing Street or Rashtrapati Bhavan or the
Shinju.
Prime Minister or Shinju. I've been to all those places where the highest elite, and you've sort of been to all these big even business centers and offices, whether it is in New York or London or San Francisco, Tokyo, everywhere. You've been to all that, but you've also been and seen the really back of beyond places in India. I think the ability to bridge those two as part of the same profession, nothing which can be more rewarding.
Wow, sir, what a beautiful, what a deep, and what should I say? I don't have words way to end this conversation. Thank you so much. And I have to say that I'm very proud, and we are very proud that we have an IAS officer, a bureaucrat, and a leader like you in our country.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.